Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, there's something we really want to get to, and we've been looking forward to it, and this has to do with nuclear power, energy demand, meeting the increased demand. Let me throw out some statistics.
Let's hear them, Carol.
U.S. demand for electricity will surge almost 16% over the next 5 years, more than triple the estimate from 1 year ago, driven by new data centers and factories that are going to suck up power. This is according to the energy consulting group Grid Strategies, Tim.
Yeah, this has been on your top of your mind because you moderated this panel at the Nuclear Energy Institute's Financing Institute to talk all about that power demand and where the supply will come from and the role that nuclear energy is helping to meet that demand. You kind of been like not stop talking about nuclear power.
It was really...
Like, where were you 10 years ago?
It was a really fun conversation. All right. I'm a little slow to the party.
No, what I'm saying is the tone has shifted so much just in the last decade.
It's remarkable. And really, I would say a lot of momentum in the last year or year and a half, especially because of the AI demands. With us from Washington, D.C. is the president and CEO of NEI. It's the Nuclear Energy Institute. She is Maria Korsnick. NEI, by the way, the lobbying arm of the nuclear power industry. Maria, thanks for your patience. News flow does not stop, as you well know, including in your industry. What is the nuclear energy industry preparing for over the next few years? And be as specific as you can, because I think time frame is important here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Carol, for having me. And again, thank you for participating in our finance conference. We just saw each other a few days ago in New York City. Let me just get right to your point, right? In the next 2 years, we're expecting at least 4 grid scale applications for 4 different sites, a handful of microreactor applications, 5 sites with construction activities in flight, and 2 microreactor startups. So when I say that nuclear is moving, I just want you to feel that not only is the R&D, which we're going to be very thankful to our national labs, have brought a lot of different ideas to the marketplace, but you're actually now seeing it go into site applications and construction applications to get things moving.
What would you say is the difference between the Biden administration's approach to nuclear energy versus the Trump administration's approach to nuclear energy? How did things change in January?
So that's interesting. You know, this is maybe one of the only things, but one of the very few things that gets bipartisan support. And interesting, if you think about nuclear, right, and you say, hey, well, it's very reliable. You know, it's clean, it's carbon free, it has jobs. You know, like there's enough in there to love on both sides of the aisle. On the Democrat side, you're going to get it more for the carbon-free aspect of it. On the Republican side, you're going to get it more for the energy security, national security, high reliability of the energy source. And both sides love the jobs.
So talk to us a little bit more about the build out. You kick things off with, things that are happening now. I feel like from the conversation and listening at the event last week, that realistically, a lot of folks said when we really think about nuclear energy, while the U.S. is active, that it's still a very small portion of our electricity generation, right, in terms of a power provider, that build out might be 8 to 10 years away. You're in it. You're talking to the players that are in it. What is the realistic time frame that it is a substantial or more substantial part of generation of power here in the United States?
So today, nuclear is about 20%, just under 20% of the generation. And so I would say, that's a significant portion. But to your point, let's talk about all of that demand. And you mentioned earlier the AI demand that's really getting into the marketplace. But, it's not just AI. It's also onshoring manufacturing. It's also, the fact that you want to build out the clean energy supply that we have today. And so all of that together is really driving this demand much higher than what we had imagined even just a few years ago. The next few years, you're going to see ones and twos of things built, think pilot projects over the next few years. And I think in the 2030s and the 2040s, a very significant build out. And I want to add, it's not just a build out in the United States. The conversation we're having about nuclear, it's happening around the globe.
Well, and why is it so important? Because, that is something certainly that came up at your event last week, that look at Europe, look at France, look at China, look at various nations in terms of their percentage of power generation being larger than what it is in the United States. If the U.S. doesn't have a role in this area, what does that mean?
Yeah, so let's just try that on for size. Who is interested in building a lot of commercial nuclear? Russia and China. And they're not only interested in building it in their own country. Today, right now, Russia is building nuclear plants in 10 other countries. And why is that? Well, it wasn't too long ago where we saw Russia turn off the gas supply to Europe. So I would tell you there's a geopolitical strategy on some countries that would like to control other countries' energy supply. And why should we fall for that? So we have fantastic technology. We have the ability to really help our allies. And in that way, we protect them from this kind of behavior. And, it would be sad to see this replicated. In 10 to 20 years, we look back and say, oh, why do they have the power over commercial nuclear industry? Why do they have the power over all of these different countries? We shouldn't let ourselves get there. So from a national security perspective, from an energy security perspective, the United States needs to lead in commercial nuclear power.
I think if you think about what happened over the last 10 to 15 years, there may have been some concern about nuclear stemming from the earthquake in Japan and what happened in the wake of Fukushima here in the U.S., 3 Mile Island, and then, of course, Chernobyl back in the 1980s. What would you say to somebody who's watching right now, who's listening right now and says, you know what, I'm still not convinced this is a safe alternative?
So I've been in the commercial nuclear industry for 40 years. I'm a nuclear engineer. I visited Fukushima after the accident. I talked to the operators that were there. We brought all of the chief nuclear officers from Japan to the United States to meet with the chief nuclear officers here. Very, very intimate with exactly what went on there. And I can tell you with all assurances that the United States absolutely would not have a Fukushima-style accident. I would also tell you, and I was just in a Japan roundtable conversation earlier today, that the Japanese are restarting their plants and the Japanese are talking about building new nuclear plants. So the country that was most connected to that particular situation has also reassessed and value that nuclear can bring to them and their reliable energy and clean energy supply. I have worked at our nuclear plants, and I would not hesitate to live next to any of the nuclear plants in the United States. They are very, very safe technology.
One thing, though, I do want to ask you, though, the other thing is it's complicated. And, it comes up, Maria, anytime we talk about nuclear energy. First of all, I do think about climate change and the natural disasters. And so the placement of nuclear plants, whether it makes it more trickier in terms of whether or not they'll be resilient to climate change disasters. The other thing is nuclear waste. It feels like we still have not figured out a really long-term solution to that. How do we think about that? Because it hasn't really evolved in figuring that one out.
So I would tell you from a nuclear waste perspective, it is safely stored wherever it is today. What you're mentioning is we haven't figured out a single place for us all to put our current used fuel in, and that's true. Other countries have. I just went to Finland last year. They opened up their deep geologic repository. We are more than capable of figuring this out. It's not a scientific problem. We have to just figure out where we would like to site this and do so safely. The other thing I would add is that I think very much in our future, there's likely going to be reprocessing. Today, we don't reprocess. I think tomorrow we will. And the thing that we call waste today, it's a future resource. And it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to take that future resource and get more use out of it and then store what ultimately we don't need. And it'll be a small fraction of what we have today.
It's interesting to hear that because we've had so many years to decide on and find a solution for this, but literally nobody wants this in their backyard. They don't want it at Yucca Mountain. They don't want it in other parts. If we can't find a place to put it, where do we put it?
Well, actually, I think we're really going to change the equation. Your grandkids and their grandkids, they're going to look at this very differently. They're going to look at it as the resource that it is. I can tell you, I know because I already have members that have businesses that are interested to, my words, mine this used fuel. There's things in this used fuel that they would like to get, and they would like to get because they're coming up with a probe that's going to go in outer space, or they're going to put a probe and it's going to go deep down into the ocean, and there's things in this fuel that would be helpful to them. And if you think about space and us going other places, whether going to the moon or we're going to Mars, again, there's things in this that can be helpful. There's companies that have already formed around trying to do the reprocessing equation, if you will, coming up with new ways to do that. We have a company that's part of NEI today that is interested in inventing a new reactor. They're well on their way. They already want to use the used fuel as part of their fuel. So they are interested very much in taking used fuel and changing it to something that they can use. So I just want you to feel that the whole conversation around this thing that we call waste is very much changing. Is it going to change tomorrow? No, but you can see that it's evolving, and that ultimately we're going to find sort of the best solution set for this. France reprocesses today, for example. Canada, just north of us, they've just landed on a long-term repository. So again, I guess I just have confidence in us as a country that we're going to figure that out.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Listen, so great to get some time with you, and it was really wonderful to be a part of your event. As Tim mentioned, I've been talking about it kind of nonstop in terms of the conversations. Maria, be well. Maria Korsnick, she's president and chief executive officer of NEI. It's the Nuclear Energy Institute, joining us on this Wednesday from DC.
We're talking about the increased energy usage that we've seen. A lot of that has to do with AI. Check out all the news about AI just in the last couple of days. Carol, lots of headlines. Apple rolling out this $599 $599, excuse me, iPhone 16e with an AI bid for growth. Microsoft unveiling AI tools that can create video game scenes that would normally have to be programmed and animated by a human. It's a model it built using data collected from Xbox gamers and their controllers.
There's so much going on. And don't forget, this comes after the big news. Earlier this week, we talked about this. Mira Murati, the former chief CTO over at OpenAI, launching a new AI startup. And then you had OpenAI co-founder Ilya Sutskever raising more than $1 billion for his startup at a valuation of over $30 billion.
Okay, lots of money going into this. And Jeetu Patel is on top of all of it. He's executive VP and chief product officer at Cisco, where he's charged with making sure that Cisco's portfolio works in the world of AI. He joins us from Silicon Valley. Jeetu, where do you see Cisco's place in this new world of AI?
You know, the way that we think about this, firstly, Carol and Tim, thank you for having me on the show. And you know, if you look at the way that the world is evolving right now, it's moving really fast. But if you look back at the gold rush, think about Cisco's position over here as we're going to provide the infrastructure and the safety and security guardrails so that organizations can actually use AI scalably in the market. And if you think about a common sentiment that you have right now in the market, and we've done a study to actually prove this as well, there's an overwhelming majority of companies where the CEOs are very excited about the possibilities of AI, but virtually all of them feel very underprepared. In fact, the study that we did, we found that 97% of the CEOs that actually were pushing AI projects that were really excited about it, only 1.7% of them felt fully prepared. And I totally get it. I mean, this is it's a very fast-moving market. People have to kind of think differently. And so that's an area where we feel like, you know, having preparedness and infrastructure, making sure that safety and security don't become impediments for the adoption of AI, and having the skills gap get really addressed are the three big challenges that most organizations have that we at Cisco want to try to go out and help our customers with.
Jeetu, one thing I think about is, you know, there's the idea of move fast, break things. Get it. There's also, well, wait a minute. We want to see where the dust settles when it comes to AI a little bit, because right, we're at this point, more than 2 years in of just the euphoria and the build and the spend. And now we want to see, okay, what do we get for our money? Is there a little bit maybe of that going on, that there are executives, especially of smaller or mid-sized companies, who are saying, we got to kind of hold off until we really understand how do we monetize this?
Yes, if you take a step back and broadly, like if we take a look at what's happening in the market, there's only two kinds of companies that are going to exist in the market. There's a first kind, which is going to get highly dexterous with the use of AI, and the second, which is going to be, struggling for relevance. Now, if you look at the great ones, majority of them are getting slowed down because of a few very foundational reasons. The first one is, safety and security gets to be a big concern, especially for large regulated organizations. They want to make sure that they tread carefully on that front. And as you have things like DeepSeek and the cost of models gets to be lower and lower, and the cost curve goes down precipitously, you're going to have more and more models that are out there. And these models, by definition, are unpredictable. And we found that it's pretty easy to jailbreak these models. And so that safety security concern is a real one. The second area is that people just aren't quite equipped for going out and making sure that the infrastructure is ready for AI. And then the third one is this notion of skills. And if you think about skills, I personally believe that staying on the sidelines is not going to help you go up the learning curve. So you have to jump in. You have to jump in the fray and make sure that you're starting to take some projects and learn from those projects and have these practical experiences as a company so that you get a better feel, a better intuition of what's happening in AI and what it's going to take to succeed. But just staying on the sidelines, I think, is a really bad strategy. That's going to let others get ahead of you, and you'll be left behind.
One thing we love to hear from folks in your position who are interacting with customers each and every day is trying to get an understanding of where demand is, who's buying what, how spend is when it comes to IT. What can you tell us about the environment right now?
So there's no shortage of demand signal on AI right now. In fact, what's happening is there's a lot of money from different parts of IT that are going into AI. And then the question becomes, what are the use cases where AI is being used really well? So if you think about some of the really highly adopted use cases right now in large companies, software coding and software development, in 2025, you will actually be able to have a meaningful amount of your code for a mid-level engineer that'll actually be done by AI. And so that's an area that's going to be hugely, growing. The second area that we've seen a fair amount of movement and momentum on is this notion of a contact center agent. Each one of us, Carol and Tim, we all probably will spend about 4 to 6 weeks of our lifetimes on hold waiting for some agent when you call a company and they need to make sure that they actually solve your problem. That's an enormous waste of time for humanity at large. And I think there's going to be 90 to 95% of these calls will be addressed with a voice agent that is going to be an AI agent, where it'll sound just like
waiting.
One that
literally still waiting for that to happen.
One that actually works and is, I don't know, like I do feel like we've all gone through automated systems and
representative. Representative.
Yes, exactly.
Representative. That's how I do it.
That's exactly right. So is it really going to be a very different experience?
It will. I think one of the challenges that we've had, if you think about, calling an agent, and when you have something that's an automated agent, the reason it sounds so frustrating is it sounds like a robot. And you can't interrupt it. It doesn't understand tonality. It doesn't understand expression. Doesn't understand the emotion that the customer might be feeling. And so what you're now starting to see happen is these voice agents are getting so sophisticated that you can interrupt it. It speaks at the speed that a human would be able to speak. You can redirect it. You can throw curveballs. It'll understand your tone. If you're frustrated, it's not going to ask you, silly questions. When you're frustrated about things that are like, how's the weather? How are you feeling? Because that's not what the customer might want to talk about. So those kind of dynamics will fundamentally change the take rate and adoption of this. So in the next 2 years, I assert that it'll probably be about 80 to 85% of the inbound calls that come in will be able to be handled by an AI agent. And the ones that aren't handled by an AI agent, the AI agent will be smart enough to hand it off to a human agent with all the context. So you don't have to repeat your account number again, and you don't have to go out and kind of restate your problem just the way that we actually feel right now. And that's what gets the frustration levels high. And I'm really hopeful about that entire category. So that's the second category where you're seeing a fair amount of momentum.
Yeah.
And then there's many more use cases and automated workflows that you'll start to just see get more and more proliferated throughout the entire corporate landscape.
Well, don't judge me, Jeetu, but I just started really playing with ChatGPT, and I came in and I was like kind of blown away. I came in one morning, I'm like, Tim, you've got to start playing with this thing.
Soon you're going to be paying $200 a month for the agent feature. I see it happening.
Everything's a monthly fee.
I don't know if you folks have tried out this operator. It is unbelievable what it can do, because
that's the $200 a month version, right?
Yeah, it's the $200 a month version. And by the way, the interesting part is they're losing money on the $200 a month, which tells you the amount of impact and the amount of adoption rate that is. Most people think it's bad. I think it's a really good sign for AI, because there's no shortage of people wanting to use this. They're solving a real problem. So you can literally, Tim or Carol, tell this agent, hey, I want to go out for a movie with my spouse tonight, and I want to make sure that I can have dinner. Can you go find me a dinner reservation?
It's pretty
and
remarkable.
find the movie? And it'll just do it for you.
Yeah. And listen, Jeetu, come back soon. I really would like to continue this conversation with you. Really enjoyed it. Jeetu Patel, Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer over at Cisco, joining us from Silicon Valley.